what it's been like for the people living out here and not being able to leave the island.
I'm on my way to meet Connell MacLeod, who was born and raised on neighbouring Lewis, and luckily we catch a break in the weather.
Yes, it was raining that good road, but it was slippery. Good work.
So fingers crossed, Daddy, this is where my house is going to be. It's a wee bit airy at the moment.
Wow, that's a door upper.
It's just a wee bit of a door upper, and I think you can see why. So this week is alarm. My granny was born in that house down there, and so this is a very important croft for the family. You will find that people from the Hebridean Islands were very proud of where we're from. We are Scottish, but we're a wee bit distinct with our own language and culture and identity. Community, you can imagine, in a wee village like this is very, very important.
We're social species, aren't we, human beings?
As much as you want to come and live somewhere really remote, we do need that contact every now and again.
Yes, it's been amazing how folk have really made sure that everybody's been okay. That if you're a wee boy who doesn't see his pals anymore, or an old granny who's not seeing their family, that they're getting a little bit of community feel even if it's from a distance.
As a proud Hebridean, Connell has been sharing videos of island life on his TikTok account, where he's become a bit of a sensation. Over lockdown, he racked up 10 million views as the Hebridean Baker, posting dozens of traditional recipes.
Andy, welcome to Well, it's been quite an adventure, to say the least. It's been really quite special to be able to promote the islands. I do garlic lessons, but mostly really good. My favourite ones is when I have maybe a classic bake. So it's maybe say it's like a tiramisu, but I give it a wee Scottish twist.
How would you give it a Scottish one?
Well, there's no harm in throwing a wee bit of whiskey in.
Yes! So what are we making now?
So we're going to make the traditional bake called a duff. On the mainland, we call it a clitty duffling. But our first stone is a very important stone because my aunt Bella, who is 92, makes the best duff on the island.
Connell's aunt entrusts us with her special ingredient for a perfect pudding, her own homemade 3-fruit marmalade.
Sprinkle of that, and that will make it just perfect.
And with that, we get to work on making some duff.
It starts off really easy.
This traditional Scottish dessert is made with fruits and spices, then wrapped in a cloth and steamed.
Oh, look at that! This is baking gold. Serve this with a smile and a Scottish bake.
Whatever food goes, shoulders goes too. So here is our duff.
Mm-hmm. The texture is slightly different. I thought it would be like a typical fruit cake, but it's a bit wetter. And I think it's absolutely lovely. It's delicious.
And I think the marmalade has made a difference.
I was going to say, if it wasn't for your aunt's marmalade, but what are your feelings about the island opening up again for tourism? Are you not worried about COVID potentially taking hold of the community like it's never done before?
I think we have to stay and be conscious for a long time yet. But I think the island has done really well in making sure that people are safe. The vaccination program has done really, really well. But also as well for us Hebrideans who haven't been able to venture very far, for us to be able to see other parts of the UK with us too.
How do you say cheers in Gaelic?
So
Slide.
The main town on the Outer Hebrides is Stornoway, home to around 6,000 people. And it's here that the first leg of our British road trip comes to an end.
I think with all the COVID rules and restrictions, a lot of us have just got used to staying at home. But then I've come out here and immersed myself in all of this nature and got to meet actual real people, not just faces on a laptop or phone screen. I think it's fair to say that nothing will ever be the same again after the pandemic. But if it teaches us to cherish more moments like this and to travel in a more mindful and responsible way, then maybe we can make it a change for the better.
And in 2 weeks' time, our journey across the UK continues. For the second leg of our Road to Recovery tour, I'm crossing England's biggest county, from seaside to countryside, to see how the people and places of North Yorkshire are emerging from lockdown.
Hello everyone, I hope you're doing well. I think most of us will see some sunny spells today, but what I can't promise is your tour blue sky for everyone. It should be dry for most of us, but we do have some detail to pay on that. So here's the big picture, the pressure chart, high pressure is going into the south. We have some weak right fronts pushing into Northern Ireland, western part of Scotland, down towards the southwest as well. And they will not only bring thicker cloud, but also some patchy rain, the risk of some showers as well across western fringes. Now, east of that is looking better. It was a pretty miserable day yesterday across southeastern parts of England, and some mist and fog here was clear as we head through the day. Top temperatures 23 Celsius there in the southeast. As you can see here, the weak weather front, southwest of England, up through western parts of Wales towards the northwest, and Northern Ireland. I think western parts of Scotland, and then it curves around really towards northern parts of Scotland, introducing the clouds, some showers with the odd rumble of thunder possible as well. UV levels today, moderate or high for most of us. Now, as we move through this evening, the weather front is moving towards the east, taking the cloud with it, taking some showers with it as well. Put some quite misty and murky across southwestern parts, with some heavy downpours continuing for a time, and our temperatures tonight down to between 9 and 13 Celsius. So looking at tomorrow then, I think it will be a cloudy start for many of us, but I think western parts see a bit more in the way of brightness once this weather front clears the southwest, much of Wales, Northern Ireland, and then western parts of Scotland. And really, we're flipping things tomorrow, because you can see where the weather front is first as we head through the afternoon, and tomorrow's top temperatures reaching about 20 or 21 Celsius. Now, as we look towards the end of tomorrow and then into Monday, we have another weather front which wants to push in from the west, but high pressure also wants to find zone. Because raining weather fronts here are going to across some parts of the UK, in turn, bringing some showers, some clouds as well. The breeze will tend to strengthen along that weather front, pushing into Northern Ireland eventually. But sunny spells on offer, and I think top temperatures on Monday, again, reaching about 20, 21, maybe 23 Celsius. Now, as we look towards the rest of this coming week, if the temperatures will want to rise a bit, we will see some showers as well, often quite calm, but there are sunny spells in the forecast, so fingers crossed, most of us will see those. And the first great season.
It's been the launch pad for some of the biggest names in hockey. 16 singles won their place to compete in Canada. But experience the fun and joy of live music from London. BBC Cardiff Singer of the World
rather managing a debate about concussion. Realising that actually this is deadly serious.
Concussion, also concussion.
Evidence that those running the game could have done more.
You could say around and say, what really causes this when the competition comes to
Luckily, it cuts the concussion screaming out on BBC iPod. Download the BBC News app now and get the latest headlines as they happen. Personalise your app to learn more about the stories you care about and watch BBC News live wherever you are. Stay up to date, whatever you're up to. Download the BBC News app.
This is BBC News. These are the latest headlines in the UK and around the world. The world's leading economies say they're on the brink of announcing an historic deal to tax tech giants during talks in London. G7 finance ministers say it would be a groundbreaking change.
We have an agreement which will really change the world, and we will be able to do what we have to do for our people.
Testing is ramped up as the UK sees the highest number of new COVID infections in 2 months, raising more questions over the further relaxation of restrictions. The devastating conflict in Ethiopia as the UN warns hundreds of thousands could starve. Hello and welcome if you're watching in the UK or around the world. Finance ministers of the world's leading economies remain confident of striking an historic deal in London today on taxing tech giants. The agreement by the G7 group of finance ministers is set to include a global minimum rate of corporation tax. The base rate of 15% is seen as a starting point. It's lower than the minimum rate of 21% that had been proposed by President Biden. The plans are also set to stop major multinational companies, including Apple and Microsoft, from paying little or no tax in countries where they make money. The UK Chancellor Rishi Sunak says businesses should pay the right amount of tax in the right place. Germany's Finance Minister Olaf Scholz said the deal, if struck, would change the world.
It will be very effective, yes, on the countries who have higher taxes, but it is helpful that they know that there is a basis. And it will be looked country by country. I'm sure that this will be the outcome also. So we will have an agreement which will really change the world, and we will be able to do what we have to do for our people. And this will be a turning point in the global cooperation, because the last decades were going into the other direction. Now we are going into the right direction.
Our business correspondent Katie Austin has been explaining what obstacles need to be overcome before this landmark agreement can be reached.
The context for this is very interesting, the timing of it. We've had the pandemic. COVID has wreaked havoc on the finances of many nations. They've had to borrow hugely to pay for the economic cost, and therefore sources of new revenue, new tax are very welcome right now. But there are some sticking points to agreement being reached, although there are very optimistic noises coming out of those who are attending the summit. We think the sticking points are mainly exactly what the rate should be. 15% has been talked about. Will they be able to agree on that, or will they say they support the idea of at least 15% being the minimum level? And another major sticking point relates to the fact that some countries, including the UK and France, have already introduced their own digital taxes. And the US says that as part of this straight away, and instead this global minimum level would come in, negating the need for the digital tax. But if that happened straight away, and then some time before an international level would reach, well, that would mean that actually these companies were paying less tax for the moment. So that is another sticking point. It looks like we could probably, but obviously nothing is certain until we hear the detail, we could probably end up with something as well where there's a new ability to tax these big companies based on where their sales are made. So not just where, for example, they have their factories and their patents, their kind of HQ, if you can put it like that.
So could those sticking points be enough to stop it?
Potentially they could, until there's a deal, obviously, there is no deal to sound like talking about Brexit, is it? Nothing's agreed till everything's agreed, but yeah, there are certainly, as I said before, very optimistic noises from the French and the German finance ministers speaking to the BBC yesterday. Were saying there was certain there would be some sort of agreement today, so we're watching and waiting now.
Well, we've had a little update via Twitter from the Treasury, and they put out a picture. Let's just show you it. It's the G7 finance ministers taking a little break. The Treasury tweet says, Chancellor Rishi Sunak and fellow G7 finance ministers take a break following a morning of productive discussions in London. So there they are, socially distanced in the sunshine. We'll keep you updated. More surge testing for COVID is set to take place in the UK after the country recorded the highest daily number of coronavirus cases since March. Several areas, including parts of Berkshire, Kent and West Yorkshire, are experiencing a rise in infections linked to the variant first detected in India, now known as Delta. Scientists are urging caution over plans to lift restrictions in England later this month. Eleanor Wilkinson reports.
With an increase in infection rates, NHS leaders are continuing to stress the message, come forward to get your vaccine when you're called. It is the Delta variant, first detected in India, which is causing problems. Public Health England says it's now become the dominant strain in the UK. Where it's been detected, surge testing has been taking place. From Monday, residents in parts of Reading and Wokingham in Berkshire will be urged to have a test as part of a 2-week programme.
One of our real concerns about these Delta variants is if it keeps circulating, people are getting sick at the moment, we've got virtually hardly any hospital admissions. If it keeps circulating, we might get some more variants, we might get some more mutations, and let's have to say it, we really want to try and minimise the number of these variants in the community so that we can get people vaccinated first.
The latest figures from across the UK show there were more than 6,200 new coronavirus infections in the last 24-hour period. That is the highest daily number of cases since the end of March. 11 deaths were recorded in the last 24 hours. Although hospital admissions are rising again in areas affected by the Delta variant, on the whole, they continue to remain low.
What we think we can start to say now, based on that experience from those who've been confronted this way, is that it does look as though the vaccines have kind of broken the chain between catching COVID-19 and potentially being very, very seriously ill and potentially dying.
As the vaccination rollout continues, the UK regulator has approved the Pfizer vaccine for 12 to 15-year-olds. The UK's Vaccines Committee will decide whether they should be offered it.
We want to be clear in the reasons why we're immunising with children. We need to be absolutely sure that the benefits to them and potentially to society far outweigh the risks.
With a rise in infection rates, many in England are now asking what it means for June the 21st. That's when the government hopes to move to its final stage of its roadmap for lifting lockdown in England. The Prime Minister and Health Secretary say more data will be assessed next week before any final decisions will be made about restrictions being lifted in England. Eleanor Wilkinson, BBC News.
The Indian capital Delhi has announced a gradual lifting of COVID restrictions weeks after being ravaged by a second wave. Markets and malls will partially reopen from Monday. Despite the move, officials are still warning the country to prepare for a third wave of coronavirus. Meanwhile, Australia's second most populous state of Victoria has reported a small increase in COVID cases as authorities try to find the source of the highly infectious Delta variant that first emerged in the year. A total of 17 new cases have been confirmed. The state capital, Melbourne, entered its second weekend of a hard lockdown, which is due to end in 5 days. Leaders of 7 of the world's most powerful countries will meet in the UK next week, where coronavirus will no doubt be high on the agenda. G7 leaders are facing calls to share vaccine supplies as some developing countries go without. We can talk now to Mukesh Kapila, Professor Emeritus of Global Health at the University of Manchester and former Director of the World Health Organization, who joins us live now from Geneva. Thank you very much for joining us. How do you think vaccine distribution should be prioritised?
Well, there is a global shortage of vaccine. That means spraying the world with vaccines is not going to solve this problem. Therefore, vaccine distribution and its uptake needs to be focused in the way you do surge testing. You need to do surge vaccination, concentrating on those places where the epidemic is spreading fastest. That means really using your limited stocks, but as a priority towards those locations, where the virus is spreading fastest.
And how would you decide where to take them from? I mean, there have been moves, obviously, to redistribute vaccines, but when you look, for instance, at the scale of the vaccination program that's required in India, which is, of course, been in such a terrible situation with coronavirus, the numbers just don't come close to what's required.
I don't think there is any answer to that because of the absolute shortage of vaccines. Now, there are hope that the spray vaccines for West should be shared with the developing countries. But I don't think there are that many spray vaccines in the Western world. Leaders of the G7 countries, for example, have a duty to their own citizens also. The sooner the G7 populations, in other words, the richer countries, get vaccinated, the more we can get on with distributing the vaccines and increase production in developing countries. So when we talk about vaccine equity, of course, no one can disagree with this, but we have to be realistic that every government has to look after its own citizens first. So I think for the developing countries, for poor countries, they have to really continue with public health precautions. They have to husband their stocks. They have to make sure that the vaccines they have are not wasted. The stories we are hearing of some countries throwing away vaccines because they haven't been able to distribute them to the population is heartbreaking. We need to invest in increasing vaccine logistics and making better use of those vaccines, particularly in hotspots in those countries.
Sorry to interrupt you, sorry. I was just thinking, in the meantime, what happens with people in countries who have been double vaccinated? Because, of course, we're still seeing a lot of restrictions on travel because countries, as is clear, are all in different situations regarding COVID currently.
I think the science is reasonably clear, and that is that if you're vaccinated, double vaccinated, as you say, then the chances of getting the infection or transmitting the infection are relatively low. And therefore, those people who are vaccinated, they should be allowed to resume a normal life. And the sooner we can do that, and open up the world, the better it is for recovery. And also it's an incentive for the vaccine countries that they should take up the vaccine whenever that is offered. So I don't believe that the vaccine restrictions that are being imposed, for example, in the UK recently or in recent weeks are really going to make any difference because border closures, the border restrictions don't stop the spread of variants.
Mukesh Kapila, Professor Emeritus of Global Health, thank you very much for joining us. The United Nations has issued a stark warning that Ethiopia could be heading for a repeat of the deadly famine of 1984 unless a ceasefire is agreed. Months of fighting between government forces and the regional authorities in Tigray have destroyed crops, leaving hundreds of thousands of people near starvation. Now the government's making it hard for aid agencies to reach those trapped by the fighting. Leticia Bader is the former Africa director at Human Rights Watch. Speaking earlier, she told me there's a pressing need for more international attention.
Well, we are talking about a humanitarian crisis, but this is also a human rights crisis. The parties to the conflict, so this is the Ethiopian government, the Eritrean government forces, but also allies to both of these parties, have directly contributed in their actions and abuses of the civilian population to the humanitarian crisis we're talking about now. So I'm talking about targeted attacks and destructions of harvests, burning, occupation of land, destruction of a lot of the civilian infrastructure in the region. Hospitals have been destroyed, looted. So all this is having an impact. At the same time, as you pointed out, restrictions on humanitarian actors, on aid agencies continue. And a lot of the attacks on civilians is also having an impact on people's ability to reach assistance. A lot of people are too scared to move right now. So one of the big concerns is a lot of people are in need of assistance and are just not receiving it at the moment.
The Ethiopian government has so far refused international calls for a ceasefire. It said its forces are close to finalising operations and eliminating all armed opposition. Without a ceasefire, what are the prospects of getting aid through to those who need it?
But what is key is basically for the parties to the conflict to stop conducting this abusively. I mean, as I just mentioned, there are very clear rules in conflict as to how behavior should not target civilians. And one of the big problems right now is that the actions of these parties is basically making it very difficult for humanitarian assistance to reach the populations in need. So it's clear international action and pressure needs to continue. It's been very positive to see a much more concerted effort by a lot of Western diplomatic officials in the last 10 days raising concerns about the humanitarian situation. It is essential to underline how this is also a human rights crisis, but there are many voices missing right now. The African Union has been by and large silent about what is the biggest human rights crisis on the continent right now. Gulf states who have a lot of links and involvement in the region have also not been pressing warring parties to treat civilians as they should be. So really the pressure needs to continue, and it needs to come from many voices which are just too silent right now.
Leticia Bader talking to me earlier. An update on our headlines on BBC News. The world's leading economies say they're on the brink of announcing an historic deal to tax tech giants during talks in London. Testing is ramped up as the UK sees the highest number of new COVID infections in 2 months. And a devastating conflict in Ethiopia as the UN warns hundreds of thousands could starve. Visitors may be returning to some of the UK's most popular tourist destinations, but employers are reporting problems recruiting staff. In Cumbria, tourism bosses are warning the situation is reaching crisis point. They say the sector has been badly hit by new post-Brexit immigration rules. Yunus Mura reports.
The Red District is looking busy. The visitors have returned in large numbers, but fewer people are choosing to work here. And Ms. Deli in Bosnia is facing an unfamiliar problem. Its owner has another cafe in Keswick that's down to open just 5 days a week. Here, the chef retires soon. That position hasn't been filled.
When we reopened last July, we didn't seem to have a shortage of people coming forward for jobs, and something seems to have shifted. But it might mean that we do have to reduce what we can offer, either in terms of the days we're open or maybe the days we can offer food, because people just can't keep up with the demand.
The scale of the staff recruitment crisis facing the county's tourism and hospitality sector is set to have doubled within the last month.
Cumbria Tourism's latest survey highlighted the challenges facing businesses here in the Lake District, with 68% saying there's a significant problem recruiting staff. Business sponsors also reveal 73% cite a lack of applicants and 44% say there's a skill shortage.
Lack of affordable housing and public transport difficulties isn't new, but many businesses weren't expecting the
It's a bit warm out there, isn't it? Hello. A bit warm out there.
Yes.
You like this time?
And now,
Yes, it's good.
it's hot.
It's hot in the city. I gave the chickens some water and some spaghetti. Get some chicken. Da-da-da-da-da-da. What a bullshit job. Take that. Oh, steamy. I get number one. I don't know why.
The ME412C is the latest creation from a company with 20 years.